This woman had nowhere to go, no home, no family, no hope. So she walked up to a stranger's farm, looked him in the eyes, and said, "I have nowhere to sleep. Can I stay?" What happened next was not just kindness. It changed BOTH of their lives forever, and the ending, you won't be ready for it asterisk. The wind moved slowly across the empty fields, carrying dust and the faint smell of dry soil, as Elias Carter stood alone beside his old wooden barn, staring out at land that had once been full of life, but now felt as empty as the silence that followed him everywhere he went. He had lived here for years alone after his wife passed, and his children moved far away, chasing lives that no longer had space for him or this forgotten farm. The days blurred into one another. The mornings began with the same dull routine, and the nights ended with the same heavy quiet that pressed against his chest like a weight he could never lift. That evening, the sky was darker than usual. Clouds rolled in low and heavy, promising rain that the land desperately needed. But Elias felt no hope in it. He turned to walk back toward his house when he heard something faint, a voice, barely carried by the wind. At first he thought it was his mind playing tricks, but then it came again, softer, weaker, almost breaking. "I have nowhere to sleep. Can I stay?" He froze. The voice came from near the edge of his property, by the old fence where the road curved away into the distance. He walked slowly toward it, his boots pressing into the dry dirt, until he saw her standing there, a woman wrapped in a worn coat, her hair tangled, her face pale, but her eyes holding something that stopped him in his tracks. It was not just fear, it was exhaustion. The kind that came from too many nights without rest, too many days without kindness. "My name's Clara Whitmore," she said, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry her dignity. "I will not cause trouble. I just need a place for the night." Elias studied her silently. He had spent years building walls around himself after loss, after disappointment, after learning that trusting people often led to pain, but something about her presence, about the way she stood there, refusing to beg yet clearly at the edge of breaking, stirred something inside him that he had not felt in a long time. "Should try the town shelter," he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. "They turned me away," she replied quietly. "They said they were full, and I have nowhere else." The wind picked up again, tugging at her coat as if trying to pull her away from this last fragile chance. Elias looked past her, at the empty road stretching into darkness, and then back at her face. He saw not just desperation, but resilience, a quiet strength hidden beneath the fatigue. "You can stay in the barn," he said at last. "It is dry, and there is some hay." Relief flickered in her eyes. Not overwhelming, not dramatic, just a small, fragile light that seemed almost afraid to exist. "Thank you," she said. He led her to the barn, opening the large wooden door that creaked loudly, breaking the silence inside. He pointed to a corner where the hay was piled. "You can sleep there," he said. "I will bring you a blanket." He nodded again, her hands clasped together as if holding on to something invisible. As Elias walked back toward the house, he felt something unfamiliar stirring within him, not quite comfort, not quite unease, but something in between, something that felt like the beginning of change. Though he did not yet understand it, that night the rain finally came tapping against the roof, steady and relentless, and for the first time in years Elias did not feel completely alone in the storm. The rain continued through the night, falling steady and deep, soaking the land that had waited so long for mercy. And inside the old farmhouse, Elias Carter sat awake longer than usual, staring at the faint glow of the lantern, as thoughts moved through his mind in ways he was not used to. He told himself it was nothing, just a stranger in the barn, just one night, just a simple act of kindness. But something about Clara Whitmore stayed with him, her voice, her eyes, the quiet strength she carried even in her weakness. It unsettled him in a way he could not explain. Morning came slowly, wrapped in gray clouds and soft light spreading across the wet fields. Elias stepped outside, the air fresh and cool, the scent of rain lingering in every corner of the land. He looked toward the barn, hesitating for a moment before walking in, as if unsure of what he might find. But when he opened the door, He saw her sitting upright, already awake, her posture calm, her expression more alive than the night before, as if rest had given her back a small piece of herself. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Good morning," she replied gently, and for a brief moment there was something almost peaceful in the silence that followed. He handed her a cup of coffee and a piece of bread, simple offerings, but to her they seemed to carry more meaning than he expected. She thanked him again, but this time her voice held a little more warmth, a little more life, and Elias noticed it without wanting to. "You can stay another day if you need," he said suddenly, surprising even himself, the words leaving his mouth before he could pull them back. Clara looked at him carefully, as if trying to understand what kind of man would offer something without expecting anything in return. "I do not want to be a burden," she said. "You are not," he answered quickly, then paused as if realizing how certain he sounded. Day unfolded slowly. She helped without being asked, gathering tools, cleaning small corners of the barn, moving with quiet purpose as though she needed to prove her worth not to him, but to herself. Elias watched from a distance at first, but gradually found himself speaking more, asking small questions, learning pieces of her story. She had traveled far, lost work, lost stability, and somewhere along the way lost the safety of having a place to belong, but she spoke without bitterness, as if she had made peace with the hardship, even while still carrying it in. The days that followed, something began to shift, not suddenly, not dramatically, but gently. Like the rain that had softened the ground, Clara stayed longer each day, becoming part of the rhythm of the farm, her presence filling spaces that had once been empty, her quiet laughter breaking through the silence that had lived there for years. And Elias found himself changing too, without realizing it at first. He spoke more, he listened more, he remembered what it felt like to share a moment with another person, without the weight of loneliness pressing in from all sides. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the fields, they stood side by side, watching the land stretch out before them. "It looks different," she said softly. "What does he?" asked Alive. She answered. Elias looked out at the same land he had seen every day for years, and for the first time he understood what she meant. It was not the land that had changed, it was him. "Why did you stop?" she asked. "Or a moment. Stop what? Living?" she said simply. The question struck him deeper than he expected, and for a long moment he did not answer, because he did not know how to put it into words, how to explain the slow, quiet way that grief had taken hold of him until he had become a shadow of the man he once was. "I think I forgot how," he said finally. Clara nodded, as if she understood more than he had said. "You did not forget," she replied. "You just needed a reason to remember." Words settled into him quietly, but firmly, and in that moment something shifted completely. Something that had been closed for too long began to open again. Seasons began to change, the fields grew greener, the air warmer, and the farm slowly came back to life under their shared care. What had once been a place of silence and stillness became a place of movement, of quiet connection, of healing. Neither of them spoke of it directly, but both felt it growing stronger with each passing day. One night, as they sat on the porch under a sky full of stars, Elias turned to her with a seriousness that carried the weight of everything he had been holding inside. "You can stay," he said, "not just for a night, not just for a while. You can stay here as long as you want. This can be your home." To Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting both surprise and something deeper, something that had been building slowly, just like everything else between them. "Are you sure?" she asked. He nodded. "This place was empty for a long time. I think it was waiting for you." Tears filled her eyes, but she did not let them fall. Instead, she smiled, a small, steady smile that carried more meaning than any words could hold. "Then I will stay," she said. And just like that, the farm was no longer a place of loneliness. It became something else, something fuller, something warmer, something alive. Not because the past had disappeared, but because they had chosen to move forward, despite it. Years later, people passing by would see the farm standing strong, fields, thriving, laughter sometimes carried by the wind, and they would not know the story behind it. They would not know how it began with a simple plea in the dark, I have nowhere to sleep, can I stay, and how that moment had changed everything for two lives that had almost been lost to silence. But Elias and Clara knew, and that was enough.